Thanks for joining me again, Trek fans. This is Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wang. Starting us off today at 526, I Didn't Do It, or Canamar. In classic Enterprise fashion, the less than 1 minute intro of the ship finding a shuttle pod adrift, with no Trip or Archer, signals we're in for a mediocre to bad episode. Archer and Trip have been wrongfully taken prisoner for a crime they didn't commit, and put on a prison shuttle bound for a prison that's the namesake of this episode. T'Pol proves their innocence, but before they can get returned, an escape and takeover of the shuttle is made by several of the prisoners. Archer plays along since they need a good pilot before outmaneuvering his captors and saving most of the prisoners before the ship is destroyed in a planet's atmosphere. The plot is pretty mundane. It's not good or bad, but random ridiculous fight scenes take me out of the episode as a viewer. This episode was nominated for an Emmy for prosthetic makeup. I can definitely see that since there's a bunch of different races represented on the shuttle. In a sad piece of trivia, the ending had to be changed where the prison shuttle burned up in the planet's atmosphere, because in the same month the space shuttle Columbia burned up in a similar manner, and it was too soon. Finally getting some responsibilities at 525, Kim's Command, or Nightingale. This one almost gets Harry prestige when he's on a mission in the Delta Flyer with Neelix and Seven. They receive a distress call from a ship, and in an uncharacteristic move for Kim, he breaks the Prime Directive and takes a side in a conflict to help the disabled ship whose entire crew has been killed, leaving only passengers that know nothing about how to fly a ship. Harry parks the Delta Flyer in their hold and gets a brief stint as captain, then quickly stops where Voyager is set down on a planet doing maintenance and overhaul work, so that Kim can stick up for himself for once about not getting promoted in 7 years to Janeway. Before she allows him to continue as captain and the stricken vessel to help it get home, Harry's command really doesn't go so well when the passengers mutiny and remove him from the big chair for wanting to cancel the mission after he finds out they're not just passengers, and the ship has a prototype cloaking device meant to help end the conflict this race is caught up in. Harry's choices end up landing Voyager in hot water since the planet they're doing their overhaul on is controlled by the race Harry's passengers are at war with. When they figure out what's going on, they force Voyager to leave prematurely. In the end, Harry admits that even after 7 years, there's a reason he's still an ensign. He's just not ready. Kinda like Mariner on Lower Decks. There's a random cringeworthy kind of funny C-plot about Icheb thinking B'Elanna is coming on to him to help pad the runtime. Honestly, the best part of the episode is watching Voyager do their overhaul. There's a really cool shot of a warp coil being hoisted out of the nacelle by a shuttle. I believe it's the only time in Trek we actually see the much talked about warp coil. Otherwise, this is a Season 7 road to nowhere. Thinking only in yes or no terms is number 524. jazz.startrek.tng equals play. Or 11001 001. For an episode about the Enterprise docked at a starbase, there sure is a lot of random stuff going on. At only episode 15, the Enterprise is already having its computer refit by a computer-linked race known as the Binars. Data is taught by a blind man to paint. Riker creates his ultimate fantasy of jazz and brunettes in the upgraded holodeck, and Wesley gets the stink eye from the Binars while in charge of the bridge. Picard makes himself a third wheel in Riker's gin joint fantasy, and the two of them are unknowingly being sidetracked while the ship is being stolen by the Binars. When they finally leave the holodeck, they find that they are the only crew left on board and the ship is at red alert headed for Binus. After the overdramatic theatrics setting the self-destruct, they finally get to the bridge and discover what's happening. The central computer on Binus is having difficulty, and they need a computer the size of Enterprise's to offload and restart. All the people had to do was ask the Federation for help. The crisis is averted, and we get to see Picard in the pilot's position for one of a handful of times in the run of TNG. This episode isn't actively bad, especially for Season 1. As a whole, it's an unremarkable episode with a forgettable A-plot and a bunch of filler that's actually better than the main plot. 2 nitpicks I have with this one. Shouldn't the weapons room, denoted by the terrible close-up, be the armory? And while possible, beaming on a ship at warp probably should have had a line about what a hazard that should be. Making a statement about nuclear power is number 523. Causality, or time and again. After only 2 episodes in the Delta Quadrant, Kim isn't ready to give up the love of his girlfriend for a double date with Tom and the Delaney sisters. While the beginning of this recurring joke about cute twins plays out, the ship is hit by a shockwave emanating from a nearby planet. When they investigate, they find a society that's apparently destroyed itself through the use of polaric energy. Paris and Janeway are taken back in time the day before the accident before a time side effect of the explosion. After befriending a suspicious kid and almost getting rubbed out by the anti-nuclear movement, it turns out Janeway created a causality loop and was the cause of the original explosion anyway. She did one of her many classic
A leads to B leads to C, yes, godforsaken paradoxes.
We learn that the bothersomely blonde-wigged Cass has psychic powers, which will become important later in the series. The alien race of the week's primary fashion seems to be a mix of an unfinished Starfleet uniform and a candy corn. No one looks good in bright horizontal stripes, and I can't take them seriously. It's totally watchable, and certainly not the worst 3rd episode of a show's run, though. Underscoring the need for a prime directive is number 522. Reed is forgetful. Or the communicator. While on an undercover observation of a pre-warp society, Malcolm left his communicator behind. When he and Archer go back down to retrieve it, they find it's fallen into the hands of what might as well be Nazis on this planet at about a 1930s Earth level of progress. They're captured, and the military thinks they're super agents working for their enemy. Trip and Mayweather get a Suliban Pod's cloaking device working to go in stealthily, and retrieve the captain while taking fire from what might as well be stormtroopers, for the accuracy they have. Just enough action and plot to merit it being this far up the list, but tries to use extended scenes and outright filler to hit the runtime mark. Coming in at 521, Worf's first Klingon marriage. Or The Emissary. No, not that emissary. But Worf's sort of wife that I guess did the equivalent of leaving him at the altar or something? They seem to have rewritten quite a bit of this Klingon marriage ceremony by the time he marries Jadzia. She's a Klingon ambassador shipped in on basically a photon torpedo with life support to rendezvous with the Enterprise. Because for no logical reason I can think of, the Empire back near Kirk's time put a ship full of Klingons to sleep for most of a century to strike the Federation. And they only remember now that they're about to wake up, and the Enterprise is closer than any Klingon ship en route. Now, throw the A-plot away and focus on the precursor to Alexander, which is never quite revealed if this rapidly aging child was already a thing at this point, and she's not telling Worf, or if he's conceived during this episode. The Klingon lore and character depth for Worf are the only things this episode has going for it. Oh, and Kalar's amazing one-piece outfit. For all the tries at a one-piece in Trek, this one might be the best. Showing why you don't trust Harry Kim to lead an away mission is number 520, Destructive Element, or Warhead. Kim's left in charge of the night shift and wakes up Chakotay when they detect a distress call. Since Harry got the call, Chakotay suggests that he should be the one to lead the away team with the Doctor in tow. What they find is a crashed sentient warhead, but they don't figure that out until they beam it on board and it takes over the Doctor's holomatrix to hold the crew hostage. After finding out it had orders to destroy itself but survived the crash, because the war was over, it rejoins a convoy of these things and blows them all up. Out of all the times Trek has had a warning about smart toasters getting too smart for us, this is on the weaker end of them. A good performance by Bob Picardo, as usual, and the rest is just a means to that end. Speaking of which, Bob Picardo steals the show at 5:19 in Leave It to Doctor. Or Real Life. This one is polarizing for people. Some love it, some hate it, and I'm somewhere in between. The opening comical perfect family out of the 1950s drama is a pretty good start. When B'Elanna makes the Doctor's life more real, it feels like your quintessential family from the 80s to present. Over the top and over-dramatized, but this stuff is all well and good. The killing of a kid we've built up in the story, hologram or not, is not my idea of okay TV. The other plot about Paris getting caught up in the most cliché Trek trope there is, a random subspace anomaly. Then he's spit back out. There's a scene about Klingon romance novels, and honestly, B'Elanna's random scene is a better bit to me than the resolution of the other plots. Can't fault Bob Picardo, though. And more of the same closing out the block today. Bob Picardo does his best to save a lukewarm script at number 518. Insert forward pun. Or Tinker, Tenor, Doctor, Spy. The Doctor starts a daydreaming program where he fantasizes about a soap opera spin of him being badass. Janeway orders him to shut it down when it starts interfering with his routine. An alien from the hierarchy has been tuning into the Doctor's fantasies and uses the knowledge to try and attack, before realizing his error and helping Voyager out so he doesn't get disgraced. The Doctor runs his version of the Corbomite maneuver and saves the day. Bob Picardo's really hard and gives us a couple of legit funny scenes. But at the end of the day, this episode is mostly a complete throwaway. The photonic cannon is the coolest part, followed closely by maybe the only good opera in existence during the intro.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Majel. Thanks, Majel.
Starbase maintenance approaching airlock 5.
Thanks, Majel.
Unoccupied sections are being closed down.
Majel.
Specify era, location.
Thanks, Majel.
All decks empty.
Majel.
All Enterprise personnel except the captain and first officer have been evacuated.
Thanks, Majel.
Program complete.
Majel.
You have the bridge.
Thanks, Majel.
Commander Chakotay is in his quarters.
Majel.
Warp core breach a lot sooner than you think. Last chance to be a hero, Doctor. Get going.
Thanks, Majel.